Wyatt, junk collector. They were always talking to him, his friends. This morning was no different. Daylight streamed in through missing shingles, pulling on shelves, groaning with an eclectic assortment of items. This was the first time in months that some of them had felt Dawn's rosy touch. The moment was marred by muttering from the back room. "Is this you? No. Where are you hiding?" The junk shop had been there, with a sagging roof, and in need of a paint job for as long as the citizens of Argenport could remember. And as long as it had been there, it had been run by its cantankerous proprietor, Wyatt. The shop was as organized as his mind, all full of rubbish and sharp edges. Shaking an accused finger at a nearby heap of scraps, Wyatt gathered a bundle of loose granite parts and hurled them out an open window, the noise shattering the quiet morning as they clattered to the cobblestone outside. "Can't make deals on a weekday without my lucky boot, otherwise they'll get me." Like most of the city, the junk shop had been damaged by recent fighting, but the Queen's reconstruction efforts that swept the city like a spring cleaning had somehow passed by Wyatt's storefront. His neighbors, too, avoided the place. Wyatt kept cracked and rusted heirlooms in a locked glass case to separate them from the assorted treasures heaped in precarious, unorganized piles. And as years passed and piles grew, the man never seemed to age, only grew more eccentric and paranoid. Wyatt seized a large, sulphurous rock sitting on a low shelf and pressed it to his ear, bushy eyebrows furrowing. "That Emerald fellow I bought you off of said you contained a mighty beast. Well, bah! Could use an extra hand around here." Worse still was the experience of purchasing something from Wyatt. He never wanted coin, and was insulted when anyone offered. Said he always seemed to have an eye on something of yours, a precious ring, or a favorite hat. He was more interested in conversing with the customer's things than with any prospective buyer. Many people gave him what he wanted just to be quit of his company. "Tarnation! They're after me, and I can't have it," Wyatt shouted, kicking the shelf. A large orange sphere rolled off, kicking up a plume of dust as it hit the floor with a dull thump. "Don't look at me like that," Wyatt groused. "Gotta have the right tool for the job, and this job needs boot." He would regularly close up shop in the middle of the day, scuttling away on errands and little ventures with a mad cackle. Sometimes he was away for days at a time, but he inevitably returned, his pack bulging with odds and ends. "Aha! There you are." Wyatt's hand darted out like a snake snatching a worn and stained leather boot off a small pedestal. The stand was clear of other clutter, a remarkable fact in Wyatt's back room, and on it sat a warped metal crown. The crown rocked as the boot was pulled off, and for a moment the sunlight in the shop seemed to darken, as purple light leaked from a pale gem at its center. The crown spoke. "Find me, child. Follow the shadow." The words slid around the room, echoing far longer than they should have. After they had faded and light returned to the dust-choked room, Wyatt licked his lips and glared at the headpiece. "Looky here. You just need to wait your turn like everyone else in here. Now hush." Muttering to himself, he jammed his boot on and stomped out of the room, pausing only to grab a small case from a creaky hat stand. When he reached the front door, he turned around to wave at the dark, dusty room. "Off to see a minotaur about a hammer. Well, a bag of hammers. Okay, a bag of hammers and a new pet. No gossiping while I'm gone, you hear?" Dust rained down from the stained ceiling as Wyatt slammed the door, leaving his friends in the quiet half-darkness of late morning. It It was over an hour before the whispering began. Chapter 21. Blood and Birthright. A lone man rode into Argenport on a quiet autumn night. He came in with a crowd, and the guards at the shattered gate never saw his face. He took quiet, half-remembered back streets, sparks dancing from his steed's worn shoes. The heads of both horse and rider hung low, run ragged. The man still bore wounds from his last fight, but some scars burned worse than others. He was here with one purpose: to take what was rightfully his, by blood if need be. "Has it been a season already?" Eileen mused as she heard the murmurs of the crowd below. The morning after the city had been taken, the clans, Crown Watch, and civilians had all stood apart in tight defensive groups. Now they mingled, one huge press of people, clan ferocity and Argenport inventiveness bolstering one another. In the thick of the gathering below, the man pushed his way through. His head and broad shoulders were obscured by a rough cloak, and he moved with purpose, shoving a burly clan berserker aside. The warrior turned round, but the growl withered in his throat when he saw the look on the stranger's face. The man didn't stop, pushing past a silver-haired soldier on his way towards the front of the crowd. Far above, the queen stepped up to the railing, raising a hand to acknowledge the cheers. Just as Eileen began to speak, a gunshot cracked through the square. People screamed, and the man let his cloak fall away. Pointing his still-smoking gun up at the balcony with a raw and booming voice, Kaleb bellowed, "Eileen, thief, that throne was paid for with the blood of your betters. Will you defend it with your own, or will you be named a coward? I challenge you, not under Argenport law, but by the code of your clans. Caiaphas earned that right when he wed you, and as his son, I claim your throne by old laws of combat. Name the time and place, and we will settle this. I claim your throne." Sudden silence rang like a struck bell. All eyes were turned up to Eileen, who had not moved. Slowly, her eyes still on Kaleb, she nodded. "I accept." Her voice pealed over the assembly, drowning out the gasp. "Noon, 2 days from now, before my throne. You will have your chance then." Eileen's footsteps echoed down the hallways of the spire. "My queen." Sigvard, a Crown Watch veteran, and one of Eileen's advisors, said gruffly, hurrying to keep up with her, "There is no need for you to accept. The law is on your side here. Caleb's parentage is unknown. We could annul this so-called challenge by checking the lineal records and—" "I do not doubt his legitimacy," Eileen said. Sigvard blinked, confused. "What? A chip on his shoulder isn't the same as a birthright." Eileen stopped, turning to stare down at the man in his emerald armor. Because in that moment he was Caiaphas, or near enough, bold, confident, and daring. He is his heir, that much is certain. She trailed away, lost in thought. From her other side, her bodyguard cleared his throat. "You have won many such battles, clan mother," Daraka rumbled. "This is no different." Eileen's expression softened, and she nodded. "Yes, old friend. We have traveled far to be here, and we won't give it up without a fight." Speculation and whispers whirled through Argenport with a brisk autumn wind. "Last, the uncrowned prince has come to save us from the barbarous queen of the wilds," some said, rubbing their hands in gleeful anticipation. "The hot-headed bastard is just throwing a tantrum. He has no chance," Others sneered dismissively. "This is the end of Argenport," others cried. "The leaders care more about their petty fights than for the people." Many were worried. Eileen's efforts to integrate the clans into her city were still underway, and construction crews were only now moving into some neighborhoods that were harmed by her assault or by Roland's battle with the rebels. The city had weathered many conflicts, and just as it was finding its footing, this happens. Worse yet, no one knew what kind of ruler Kaleb would be. He might be cruel, or he could be just like his father. Those who knew him when he was younger reported that he was different now. A changed man. Harder, more serious. What had he found on his travels that had driven him back here? Within the first hour of the news spreading, Cabal bookies were taking bets. Eileen began at 2-to-1 odds, but by the night before the duel, the odds were dead even. The Cabal was uninterested in the outcome of this duel. Some highly placed sources said they could do business with whoever survived. After all, the house always wins. The day of the duel dawned cold and gray. A summer of violence had made way for a quiet fall, and Argenport held its breath. The throng in the throne room was muted, subdued by nervous anticipation. The high and mighty of Argenport had shown up to watch the fate of their city unfold. Representatives of other groups were in the crowd as well. The Knight Chancellor of Cambrai, the envoy from Kosel, and an elder mage from the Praxis Arcanum were all in attendance. Kaleb had arrived early, with no retinue. He sat at one end of the large stone room, eyes closed, apparently at ease. There was the groaning of hinges, and a door at the other end of the throne room opened slowly. Eileen entered, Daraka at her side. Without a word, the huge Queensguard left Eileen's side to stand with the assembled guests. In the silence, Queen Eileen walked up the shallow stairs to the eternal throne. She did not sit, but instead slowly removed her crown, her hair tumbling to her shoulders, and set it on the heavy stone arm of the ancient seat. Turning around, she said in a quiet voice, "Eirel, will you bless this duel?" Genetrix Eirel IV, head of the Solists, nodded and took a few steps forward. Eirel was an older woman, dressed richly in the white, brown, and bronze of her faith. She leaned on a heavy walking stick of wood bowed, and her voice was rich and precise as she spoke. "Sol welcomes both combatants. May this duel sort the grain of truth from the maelstrom of lies." Eileen nodded. "Thank you." She took the steps down from the throne, slowly pacing across the room until she stood at the opposite end from Kaleb. As she did, he rose, stretching. Both their faces were masks of calm. Eileen turned to a figure standing apart from the rest. "Judge?" An armored minotaur walked to the center and surveyed the room, eyes roaming over the assembled dignitaries. "Well," she said in a dry voice, "we all know why we are here and what is at stake. You may duel with all arms, firearms, magics, and guile at your disposal. You fight until someone yields. When I say it ends, it ends. If neither combatant yields, then it is to the death." The massive minotaur cast a slow, deliberate stare around the assembled witness. "I will personally cut down anyone that tries to interfere. Is that clear?" Both combatants nodded. Grinva turned to look at each of them, then said, "Good. As this may be your last chance, you may each take a short statement. Challenger? Kaleb nodded, taking a deep breath. I've said my piece. The throne is my birthright. I will not allow an outsider's words to take that away from me. I am my father's son. In the crowd, he saw Marison raise an eyebrow and nod, smiling. Kaleb turned and drew his sword. And today I intend to prove that. Grenva looked over to Eileen, who also drew her weapon. Faint stormlight flickering along the worn blade. She, too, took a breath before speaking. A ruler is judged not by the strength of their blood, but by the strength of their accomplishments. You may be Caiaphas's son, but I have done more for this city in one season than you've done in all of your years. Where were you when Caiaphas vanished? Where were you when Roland seized the regency and left Argenport in ruin? Where were you when your uncle died? Because everyone knows my answer. I have been here, on the battlefield, and on the throne, building alliances and mending old wounds. Ruling, that is the measure of a queen. Grenva nodded. Very well. The judge took 2 large, hurried steps backwards. Begin! The word had barely left the judge's mouth before Eileen let out a battle cry and pointed her blades at Kaleb. Azure lightning lanced from it, splitting the air with thunder. It struck Kaleb in the center of his chest, but instead of flinging it back, Kaleb gestured with his free hand and the lightning ground itself, singeing the stone tiles. Before Eileen could follow her opening shot, Kaleb took a step forward, throwing a roaring mass of flame, trying to overwhelm her. Another lance of lightning poleaxed the fire, negating the blast and shocking Kaleb, who bared his teeth and charged. Eileen let out another sharp shout and blurred forward, raising her own blade. The two met in the center of the room, sparks flying and metal ringing as their swords met. Both combatants leaned forward, each one struggling to overpower the other. Through gritted teeth, Eileen said, I struck down the gates of Argenport with a single blow. You will not survive this storm. Yield. Grunting, Kaleb started to push Eileen back as he growled, I've been through storms and worse in my searching stepmother. I will not be broken. He insinuated the last word with a shove. Eileen stumbled back, but righted herself quickly, cracking Caleb's chin with a swift punch. Kaleb roared in fury, and his hand darted at the shotgun at his hips. 2 heavy shots rang out, deafening both combatants. The shiftone slugs impacted Eileen's breastplate, knocking her back. Too easy, Kaleb said as he strode forward. Yield. Never, Eileen gasped, standing. Her armor was battered, but it had not been breached. This city is mine. Like hell, Kaleb spat and charged. Their blades met again, but instead of sparks, golden white light erupted between the combatants, hurling them backwards. Everyone was forced to shade their eyes, squinting through the glare and sudden gale. Desert winds, hot and sandy, tore at everyone's clothes. What is this? Grenva demanded, striding forward as a figure appeared. It was Talir, but younger than she had been in years. Her hair white and her eyes full of light. The Archmagister hovered, bathed in a yellow glow, and surveyed the room. When she spoke, her voice echoed and rebounded, redoubling and growing louder. I have swam against the currents of time to bring a warning, and what do I find? My family squabbling over a chair? Heed me, for I have seen beyond. Look to the Shadowlands. A pathway opens there. We are not alone." She glared at Kaleb and Eileen, and her voice rang with command. "End this pettiness. I expect you both in my chambers at the Praxis Arcanum within 3 days." And with another roar of desert winds she vanished, leaving everyone blinking in the sudden gloom of the throne room.